Did they change your mind?
What we had was we had a respectful, we had a very informative, and it was a very good conversation that we had, and as a starting of a good relationship. It really was.
Democratic Senator Joe Manchin there, seeming to not back down this morning, moments after his meeting with leaders of national civil rights groups, and about 48 hours after he said he will not support federal legislation to reverse the state-led voter suppression rights bills, particularly impacting communities of color. But the civil rights leaders still called the meeting, quote, very constructive with Manchin. In it, they pressed him on the need for the sweeping legislation that Manchin has all but tanked, as well as the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, for which he said he will support. But NBC News reports today even that bill faces a very steep uphill battle with just one Republican senator, Lisa Murkowski, currently backing it. Joining our conversation, the Reverend Al Sharpton, host of MSNBC's Politics Nation and the president of the National Action Network, who was one of the leaders who met with Manchin this morning. Plus, Aaron Haynes is here, editor-at-large at the 19th and an MSNBC contributor. Rev, you have said on the show that we have talked about the way the filibuster has been used to, I guess, help racist policies stay in place. You talked about making those points to Manchin, reminding him of the history. One, did that come up? Two, did he seem aware of it? Three, did he seem moved by it?
It did come up, and he did not say that he was going to change his position. A part of what we raised to him is that we had three bills in mind. And mind you, we had arranged this meeting, Mark Morial of the Urban League had arranged it for the 8 national civil rights groups to meet before he wrote the op-ed. But he did not cancel and we did not cancel because we still wanted a dialogue. The three things we wanted to talk about was Senate Bill 1, certainly on the voting rights, the John Lewis bill, and the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And what he did say is that he was open to what comes down on the George Floyd bill. He believed that the compromise that both Senator Tim Scott and Senator Cory Booker comes with, he could support. He said he would support the John Lewis bill, even though we don't know all that's going to be in that bill. But he would not support Senate Bill 1. That was the contention. So our position is, well, if you can't get the votes on any one of these three, then will you go and support what has happened before, where they have voted on bills without the filibuster, or the 60 votes that have been that are needed, and go on a majority vote? And that is where we're trying to push. He agreed that we should keep talking. He said he would reach back out before the end of this week. But clearly, the difference between the John Lewis bill and Senate Bill 1 is something that I think Speaker Pelosi's right. It's not one or the other. Senate Bill 1 deals with, one, what is going on now in Georgia and in Florida and Texas and states that are changing. John Lewis bill goes from whenever it is enacted going forward. So it would not deal with the votes that are being changed as we speak. And we don't expect the John Lewis bill to come into being until the fall. Even Speaker Pelosi said that. So you cannot act like it's one or the other that approaches the same things, because it does not. John Lewis bill doesn't deal with campaign financing. There's many things in Senate Bill 1 that is not in the John Lewis bill. We need all three. We're glad that we started the dialogue. It was very firm and candid, but clearly we are not getting all we wanted, but we are going to continue talking and pressing this with all we can.
Does he understand the racist nature of the nearly 400 bills that are being pushed in Republican legislatures?
He was certainly told that by all of us involved. Whether he came back and explicitly called them racist, no. I don't think he did not understand it. He did not argue blatant racism here. We're talking about these bills are designed to undermine mostly black areas of participation, like Sunday Souls to the Poll, we're going to stop drop-offs for ballots, and things that clearly are overused or over-indexed for usage by the black community. These are the new Jim Crow voting laws. That is why we need this. And to think at this time that you're seeing 47 states try to change voting laws, that the federal government doesn't respond, is something that I think is absolutely absurd. Of course you need voting protection. In the civil rights movement and voting rights movement of 50 years ago, when I was a kid and when Aaron wasn't even born, they had to go to the federal government to get release. And that is what we're doing, talking to Manchin and others, is go to the federal government to get relief. If we can't go to the federal government against states' rights, Jim Crow voting laws, then where can we go?
You know, Aaron, I don't want to skip over. I don't want to make too much of Joe Manchin, but I do want to dig in on one of his reasons for not supporting the legislation and not supporting changing the way business as usual is done. It's not just that 22 laws are already on the books, have already been signed. The rules have already changed in 22 cases. It's that his reason is that it's too partisan. Let me read this. It was written in the Bulwark. The point is, when you see Republicans talking about these state-level voting restriction laws, have you ever once seen an expression of concern about the purely partisan nature of their passage? And yet, it would be terrible if congressional Democrats were to pass a voting rights bill without any Republican support. So terrible that congressional Democrats are themselves refusing to pass such a bill, even though they have the votes to do it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think what I heard from a lot of the civil rights leaders that I talked to who were in the room with Reverend Sharpton was that they heard somebody who was sincere, but also seemed conflicted. This is Joe Manchin, if you can get in the Wayback Machine, is somebody who used to be a Secretary of State in Virginia. He is somebody who has worked on laws in a state and knows what it means to make voting more accessible for people. And yet this is also somebody who seems committed to the traditions of the Senate and is trying to make a choice between those two things. But the Democrats who a lot of these civil rights groups helped to galvanize to vote in November are very much wanting Democrats to act like they won the election, as opposed to Republicans who lost the election but are acting like they won. And Joe Manchin, who is not siding with his fellow Democrats and getting things like voting rights, things like police reform, the things that those Democrats voted for and said that they wanted in November to happen. So, what I heard from those civil rights leaders, just to Reverend Sharpton's point, is that they had a very candid conversation. They had, they felt like they had a listening ear in Senator Manchin. For a lot of them, this was the very first time engaging with Senator Manchin. I wonder if that's also the case for you, Reverend Sharpton. They'd never met with him before. They'd never dialogued with him before. And so, they call this an important first step today. They know this is going to be a long summer, something that's going to stretch into the fall. To Speaker Pelosi's point, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act is not going to be ready until the fall. And so continuing to work on police reform and voting rights and trying to, I guess, make a partner out of Joe Manchin is something that these civil rights groups say that they're committed to. But again, he's not the only person that they're going to be engaging with. Right. I hear that these groups are going to be talking, looking to speak to a bipartisan group of senators, anybody that would be open to hearing their arguments for why this legislation is necessary and why it needs to pass. These are folks that are used to playing the long game, but are feeling a real sense of urgency, especially to your point, Nicole, based on what they're seeing happening at the state level.
Rev, you want to answer Aaron's questions? Have you engaged much with Manchin?
No, I've not. I might have in passing met him, but I've never been in a meeting with him. This was a virtual meeting. I wasn't in a virtual meeting, a in-person meeting, or even a phone meeting with him in all these years. But she's correct. We intend to approach other senators. And again, I think this whole thing of putting process, the Senate process, the Senate tradition, ahead of the fact that you are disenfranchising voters all over this country based on the color of their skin. And if there ever was a need to go around, I believe, and many of us in that room and the organizations we represent believe, that filibuster ought to be eliminated. But if you don't want to do that, you've made exceptions to go on majority votes before certainly to save the voting rights of people that are being methodically eliminated now is reason to do this now in this case, and clearly because there is a methodical attempt by the Republicans to try and disenfranchise voters based on race. And all of this about, well, I believe that we need to do everything bipartisan. Well, the ones resisting bipartisan are the Republicans. So to sit there and say that I would want to do something based on the Republicans, I'm a minister. I believe in faith. I do not believe in fantasy.